So for our bookmark today, I've already cast on 8 stitches, and then I've knit 5 rows according to our pattern. The pattern is on your Knit It Level 3 handout, so check there, and you'll be able to follow along. Now, it doesn't really matter what material you use. I'm using cotton, but if you use an acrylic or a wool or a blend, that's perfectly fine for this pattern. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I need to establish which side is my right side. This is the side I'm going to be knitting on next, and I can tell because I have the tail coming out at the top of my needle toward the point. So I have my working yarn right here, and that working yarn is coming out of the knot, and I would be ready to start right here if I was knitting. Now I could establish either side as my right side for this pattern, but I'm going to go ahead and start with the side that I'm working on first. So I've knit my 5 rows, I've established that I've got my working yarn toward my tip, and the side that's facing toward me when I'm going to start working my next stitch is going to be my right side. Now when you're working the stockinette stitch, you're going to knit the right side of the fabric and you are going to purl the wrong side of the fabric. If we look at the bookmark that we've already created, the right side will have this classic stockinette stitch which is flat. The wrong side, which is purled, is going to have a slightly more bumpy appearance. There's nothing right or wrong, it's just simply that this side is not the outward facing side. So if you were in a hat or a sweater, this is the portion of the material that would be facing toward your body, whereas the right side, which is knit, would be outward facing toward the world. So to establish my right side and to keep my side straight, I'm going to use what's known as a locking stitch marker. These can come in a variety of different materials. They can look different. Mine looks sort of like a safety pin. It doesn't matter which kind you get as long as it's able to close and stay secured, and you can put it into pre-existing stitches without having to use the needle. I'm going to go ahead and just open this up, and I'm going to place it on my right side, and again we've established the right side is facing toward us for the next row that we're going to be knitting, and that our working yarn is close to the tip of the needle with the knot and the working yarn facing toward us. I'm going to go ahead and loop my locking stitch marker into just one of my stitches. It's not going to damage it as long as it's not pulled or otherwise ripped from the stitch. But it's just going to hang here, and every time I see it, I know that I'm on a knit row. If I'm on the other side of my work, I know that I have to purl this row. All right, now the next kind of stitch markers we're going to be using are ring stitch markers. These are placed directly within the fabric onto the needle and are worked along with the stitches. Now for our pattern, it calls for us to knit the first 2 stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and knit the first 2 stitches on our pattern. And this is going to create a knit or garter stitch edge to our bookmark. Stockinette stitch, which is done where you alternate knit and purl rows, tends to curl. So you typically have some kind of border or other finishing that's done to create a flat pattern. If you don't do that, you'll have a curled over fabric. So I've knit my first 2 stitches, and I want to keep track of where I'm going to knit and where I'm going to purl when I'm on the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm going to place in a stitch marker. Then I'm going to go ahead and knit the next 4 stitches as according to our pattern. And I'm going to place another stitch marker. And then knit the final 2 stitches. And there we go. So we've inserted all of our stitch markers. Notice the difference between the stitch marker that's removable, I can remove this at any time, and the stitch markers that are on the needle and in between 2 stitches. These stitch markers can only be removed as I'm working with the fabric. Great. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to slip our stitch markers and look at how we're going to start doing the purl stitches.